Hi, everyone. I thought today, in celebration of the release of Sex, Fidelity, and Ecstasy, which is the first series I've created in over a year and a half, I thought today, in celebration of that, we would share a little time together around three lenses through which sexual relationships can be viewed that I feel like can make a foundational shift in how sexual relationship is approached, how sexual intimacy is held, and also how, whether it's a more casual, more open, or a more exclusive monogamous sexual relationship, how they can be held and understood by you and your chosen lover in ways that don't create so much polarity and so much negotiation. I'm aware that once sexual fire is brought forward into a relationship between two people, it becomes obviously charged and often entangled and often confusing. And where a lot of people end up is in negotiating personal desires and in power plays. So having needs, having power dynamics, trying to get those needs met, eventually polarizing and kind of locking into either solidified perceptions of each other or ourselves, or just locking into these loopy dynamics, or blasting apart and totally losing each other and totally losing a love that had a lot of potential. So this is inspired by Sex, Fidelity, and Ecstasy. That audio series has a lot of focus on more sexually exclusive relationships. It's a lot about dispelling the illusions of monogamy and going deeper into the archetypal roots of it so that sexually committed relationships can move out of being domesticated moral obligations and into these more archetypally and passionate based gardens and places of real joy and ecstasy and togetherness. But for today, I don't want to just focus on that. I wanted to speak more about three things that I feel like can support whatever kind of sexual intimacy you're choosing, whether or not you're choosing to focus in with one person and create a container, or a sealed container, or if you're in a more exploratory time, or in just starting a relationship and not sure where it's going. So, three different possible lenses to reconsider sexual relationships through. So the first is to consider the third thing. This is very much an answer, and has been for me, an answer to the thing that happens a lot, even in therapy, even with good communication, even if you have understandings of each other, is that too often I've witnessed and experienced a lot of disconnection and discontent coming from the fact that relationship ends up being like two people sitting at a negotiating table saying, one saying, well, this is what I want. The other saying, well, this is what I want. Where do we meet? How can we compromise? And there's a lot of room in there for polarization. There's a lot of room in there for us to crystallize against each other and become the one who wants more commitment, the one who wants more freedom, and just to basically set each other up for separation and for a lack of harmony. And this, in a way, is just a natural thing that happens when you have 2 points. They're one point and the other, and they are polarized a little bit. They create this 2 points going back and forth. If you add a third thing, if you add a third point, then they start to balance out and become more stable. And what I would say that third point is your third thing. So whatever is calling you into a sexual intimacy, first of all, obviously there's probably some chemistry. There's a sexual fire that's been lit. But there's also usually, and maybe make sure, there's a third thing. The two of you coming together, even if it's for a short amount of time, especially if it's for a longer term committed relationship where there's a deep love and a real calling to be together, you're coming together inside of a third thing that is in its way independent of both of you. It's created through the two of you coming together. It probably brought you together. Think of your love or the harmony or the calling that brought you together as its own third thing. And let that be with you when you are trying to understand what it is that you're doing together, when you're trying to understand what serves you both. Because, when you're in conversations about who you are and what you want and what you see and what you feel and what your past was, all these things, you're often, sorry, I'm saying you so much, I often end up really kind of crystallized and solidified in a sense of myself and in an almost defensive position. There's a way in which these two positions can either agree sometimes, or they're usually compromising, or that somebody's submitting, or they're sealing up against each other and becoming defensive. If the two of you turn toward the third thing and ask it what it needs, why are we being brought together? We're inside of some kind of love. What is it that makes that love thrive? What is it that makes that harmony thrive? And there are answers there that aren't about either one of you. They would require surrender from both of you, probably, but it's to this third thing. It's not one person surrendering to the other, one person, it's not this dance of personalities or of two separate people. It's you two coming together and asking and then bowing down to the third thing and basically just ensuring that whatever beauty brought you together thrives. And whether that means it's a flower that grows and blossoms and is done, or if it's a tree that takes root and spreads out and continues to yield fruit for years, who knows? That is written in the third thing. And if you can ask it, you're going to be able to find, I think, a greater truth about what your relationship itself really is. Not who you are and who they are and how that works, but more, what are we being called to together? What is this thing that's calling us forward and how can we nourish it? So that's one thing I would offer. One lens to use, or one posture to use when you are, whether in relationship trying to maybe sort out some difficult decisions or some clarities with each other, or even if you're at the beginning of a relationship, to tune into the third thing and ask, can we get a little bit of a sense of where this is going and what it wants and what is needed to make it a good thing? It can be a very worthwhile bunch of moments to share together. It can help you be for the good of all, right? Take care of each other. Help it to be an experience that's good and nourishing rather than binding or entangling. So the third thing, another lens to consider a sexual intimacy through is the lens of alchemy. So if you're an alchemist and you're aware that you are one element and your lover is another element, and you're going to put these two elements together and you're going to light the flame of passion and chemistry and all the transformative power that sexual energy brings. You're going to light that under the coming together of these two elements for the purposes of transformation. Alchemy is very much about sifting, purifying, transforming whatever is being alchemized into its truer nature, right? And that is the promise of a sexual intimacy, if it's held in a good way, is that it will transform you and it can bring you always closer to your truer nature, sometimes through difficulty, sometimes through love, through joy, but that's the promise of it. That's the inherent power of the sexual fire and the sexual current. However, alchemy without a solid container or a crucible is just an explosion. It's a mess. Nothing happens except for detonation and kind of chaos. So in a way, again, this of course really applies to if you're going to have a long-term relationship, but even a night, create a container around what's going to happen. And I don't know how that might look for you, but there's so many possible ways to just create containment. Think about, how can this be held so that it doesn't explode, so that it doesn't become all muddy, so that something actually of my truer nature and this person in front of me's truer nature is expressed and nourished and fed through this experience. You know, obviously for a longer term relationship, you're probably talking about commitments and, well, there's a lot you're talking about. But even for a night, just being honest. Honesty itself is containment, right? When you're honest with each other, you know what container you're sitting in. You know what each of you is available for, and you have to listen. I mean, I know a lot of what I've heard mostly is, I have actually experienced this quite a bit, is not hearing what someone's telling me. So whatever intimacies you're creating, honesty is in a way the greatest container you can create, but you have to listen to the honesty of the other person. So that means even if you're feeling like there's such incredible chemistry and such a bond and wow, maybe even love, and that's what you're feeling, and the other person in front of you says, yeah, I'm not available for that. It's sometimes hard to not dismiss, but it's hard to respond to something that doesn't feel true to you, but that is where containment is, and that's how you can protect yourself and protect the exchange inside of a container that's strong, that's coherent, and that can handle and gauge the intensity of the sexual fire that will be shared. So honesty, that kind of containment, is what says, all right, this container is about this big. This person is available for about this much, and I'm available for about this much. So this is about how much sexual fire I'm going to share, and this is about how much I'm going to open these aspects of myself. You know, if the container is bigger, there's the possibility of saying then safely, I am going to open wide because I can. I'm held in here, and both of us are holding this, and it's honest, right? There's space. And that is part of the beauty of alchemy, and that's part of the wisdom of alchemy, is to know how much, how strong, and to keep a solid, stable container so that chaos doesn't ensue, right? So that's another way to potentially look metaphorically or just foundationally toward a sexual intimacy that you're in or that you're choosing, is where is the containment for this? And how am I going to either create that or clarify that so that I can move with the sexual fire that's in me in a good way and in a safe way. The third thing, alchemy. The final thing I'll mention, which just kind of popped for me, is beware of false claiming. I don't know where this lies in this discussion exactly, but I guess in terms of a lens or an awareness to hold when you are entering any kind of sexual intimacy with someone, is that there is this almost hidden dance, and I call it the dance of claiming. And there's something, I get into it more in the series, but I don't think I can do it complete justice here, but there's something, this experience of feeling claimed, meaning not owned and not possessed, but like something about this person, something about the way you come together, feeling your whole body, your whole being start to like shape to them. Feeling claimed by them, like your yearning is for them. You want them. It's like it's a claiming. And there's something very deep and very archetypal there. And a lot of where suffering comes from in sexual intimacy is false claiming. It's kind of related to not having the right size, shape, clarity of an alchemical container. But false claiming is when you either allow yourself to be claimed or are kind of accidentally claimed by someone who is not yet ready to steward you as someone who's claimed you. So if you become claimed, if your heart just starts to sing for this person and your body just is fit for them and yearns for them and for them alone, and there becomes this sense of, it's a shaping, it's a harmonic, it's like you'll know that it's happening because you won't have energy going anywhere else, and there'll be this incredible magnetism towards this other person, very specifically. So that's claiming, and claiming is gorgeous. It is a little scary because it will bring you to the edge of vulnerability and intimacy and surrender. But if who's claiming you is willing to steward you, meaning they don't possess you, but they are going to take responsibility for the fact that they've claimed you, that you are shaped for them, and that there's an inherent vulnerability there, then there is no end to the depth that you can move. But if you allow or find yourself claimed by someone who has no interest or even no awareness that that's what's happening, it can be extremely painful and very confusing. Right? It's an incoherency. And what your whole being starts to yearn for and get shaped for and need isn't going to be what it receives. And that's when a lot of these intense, the complexes around abandonment, the complexes around sacred need, the complexes around insecurities and jealousies that just become wild. That is where a lot of that can come from. So what do you do about claiming? I mean, the thing is that it can just happen, and it's a little tricky. It can be a very devastating experience, and it can also be a very beautiful experience. One thing I would say is that claiming needs to be a mutual experience. So when you start to feel yourself being claimed or shaping to fit this lover that's in your life, find out if that's mutual in whatever way you do, but beware. A false claiming will not be mutual. It'll have you leaning out of your center a little bit and being pulled off, right? A true claiming is one in which you claim and steward each other. You become custodians of each other's vulnerabilities at the same time that you become power, kind of power allies and passion allies. So claiming should be mutual, to be safe, and to be emotionally safe. And what was the other point about claiming? I don't know. Oh, I think it's just mostly that it's the piece about true claiming being a stewardship, and that it's a meeting. Like you'll know that you're not really being claimed when you find yourself over managing in order to get those needs met. There'll be these yearnings, there'll be this, it's a kind of amazing, intense, magnetic, but if you're reaching out far to get it, or begging, or constantly thirsty, and you feel yourself in front of you, or up and reaching, that's not a true claiming. A true claiming is kind of this inner fire and shaping and magnetism and meeting. What's kind of underlying that and that discernment is what I call the dance between the sovereign and the sacred marriage. So there are all these arts around what it is to be sovereign. How do you stay in your center? How do you maintain your discernment? How do you maintain the periphery of your being so that you're contained and so that you are one unto yourself? Those are the arts of the sovereign. Equally as powerful, and in some ways more... equally as powerful are the arts of the sacred marriage. And in the arts of the sacred marriage, which is what claiming is a part of, the yearning is to be taken. The yearning is to surrender. The dance of the sacred marriage is not, it is based on sovereignty. You can't go fully into surrender unless you've stood first. Unless you stand in your sovereignty, surrender just becomes submission, right? When you're not here first, what you're really doing is submitting. Once you've stood in your sovereignty and know how to return to it and have felt it in your being, then moving from that into the sacred marriage is both safe and possible. That's the dance of claiming. And when you're getting into an intimacy sexually and you're feeling into what is the truth of the claiming and what's false, what's true, what's safe, keeping yourself safe is so important, and it is really only up to you. And it has to do with how you do this dance between sovereignty and the surrender of the sacred marriage. Making sure that you return often to whatever practices are for you, work for you to bring you back here, to tend to your feminine essence, or if you're a man, to just tend to your heart and your truth. That's crucial. Don't let that go. Keep coming back. Know that the more you do that, the deeper your surrender can be, and the more right relationship, right timing, right quality and quantity of surrender it will be true, and it will take you in an upward spiral rather than entangle you into a depleting, confusing, chaotic mess, which is where a lot of sexual intimacies end up, let's be honest. So those are my thoughts, some lenses to consider being with sexual intimacy through. Coming together to be with your third thing rather than going at each other or even bowing down to each other. Considering it as an alchemy and wondering what your container is. And then becoming aware of the dance of claiming, watching out for false claiming. I hope that serves you. I did just finish Sex, Fidelity, and Ecstasy. It's been percolating in me for like 2 years. It's a 3-part audio series. That goes more into what for me is an important topic, which is sexually exclusive relationships or monogamy, and what are the archetypal roots of monogamy? What is it that we're all actually yearning for when we attempt to be faithful to one another, to have fidelity? What is that? Because we all know, or many of us are finding, that the moral, social, religious kind of domestication of sexual exclusivity it's empty, and it results in a lot of affairs and a lot of stagnancy, and that is not what sexually exclusive relationships were ever meant to be. They're meant to partake of the sacred marriage. So that was the big impulse for me to create Sex, Fidelity, and Ecstasy. And I hope this has served you. Wherever you are in your sexual intimacies, whether it's yearning for one, beginning one, ending one, nourishing one, I wish you all the best in tending to your own flame and then sharing that in a good way. Blessed be.